Hello there everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we are going to be building SM-33 from Skeleton Crew.
Can't say I remember no at it.
Or at least his head.
33!
I still haven't forgiven Jod for that. We're going to be going through the whole build process, starting with printing, going to sanding, painting, weathering, the whole thing, and at the end of it we'll have our own SM-33. I'm ready, I've got my Skeleton Crew t-shirt on, so let's get started. Okay, so we're starting off with printing the files. These files are from Pew Pew Crafts on Etsy. I will link them in the description of this video. Really high quality files, super impressed with them. They're fantastic, definitely check them out. Everything was printed on my Bamboo Lab P1P. Everything printed super well. I printed everything on the high quality settings, 0.12 layer height on a 0.4mm nozzle. That way I could do a little bit less sanding, and because this is a pretty detailed file and it has some texture on it already, I was hoping to avoid some of the sanding. So yep, I got everything printed out, and now we're going to move on to the sanding process. Alright, it's time for everyone's favorite part, sanding. Okay, so since I printed this at pretty high quality settings, I'm starting with sanding with 120 grit, and then moving up to 220. And I start with the electrical sander, and then I go in with the detail sander, and then finish it off any detail in small areas with just some hand sanding. So after that initial sanding, I wash off the print to get all the dust out of it, and it's already looking pretty smooth, a lot better than it was. And then now I'm gonna hit it with some filler primer. And then another round of sanding with 220, and with this I just did hand sanding just to go over it, just to get it even smoother. So after that last round of sanding, it's looking real smooth. Now there's still a little bit of layer lines at the top, so I'm just going to go over that with some Bondo to fill those in, those bigger gaps. And then I'll sand that down, do another layer of filler primer, and then it should be ready for the final sanding. So now I'm moving on to the other pieces, and these printed really detailed, so I'm just hitting them with a layer of filler primer first, just to fill in any of the small gaps. And then I'm moving on to the final wet sanding of all the pieces. This is just going to make it a really smooth, clean surface for the paint to go down on. So I just dip the print in the water and the sandpaper, and then I'm sanding with 800 grit. And I'm just going over it pretty lightly just to get that grit from the filler primer real nice and smooth, so that the paint will go on really nicely. And then I'm doing the same thing on all of these other pieces. Now, moving on to paint. So I'm going to have a chrome base layer, and I wanted to test out these two chrome paints, and I ended up liking the Bear paint the best, so that's the one I ended up using. I'm just giving everything a nice even coat of this chrome. Alright, so now that everything has its chrome base layer, we're going to be masking off some sections to use for weathering to kind of give that chipped paint effect. And to do this, I'm going to use some of this liquid mask here that we're just going to put on certain spots that when we peel it up after we put the other paint on, it's going to give that really nice chipped paint effect. It's going to look really good. So I'm using a silicone brush to spread the liquid mask where I want the chrome to come through. And I really recommend using a silicone brush or something disposable for this, because this stuff will really like gunk up regular paintbrushes and you'll probably just have to throw them away if you use them. Now you can also use toothpaste for this. I'm just using this liquid mask because I had seen it recommended in some other videos and it's worked pretty well for me. But I've also used toothpaste and it has very, very similar effects, so that's sort of an easier or cheaper way to go. Definitely consider that. So I'm just using some reference photos to kind of decide where I want the chrome to show through. These are actually some of the renders from Pew Pew Craft's listing on Etsy. I found them really, really helpful when I was doing the weathering. And if you make a mistake while applying this, you can just wait for it to dry. It dries in a couple minutes, and then just peel it up and it'll come right up, and then you can reapply it. Okay, so now that this is all dry, it dries pretty quickly, just a couple minutes. We are ready to move on to the final paint color. Okay, so I'm using this VHT metallic titanium paint. It's an automotive paint, and I think the color works really well for SM-33. Now, when using this paint, you want to go on in really, really thin layers. It has instructions on how you use it. And so for this first coat, I'm going on just super, super thin, like you're barely even seeing it on there, but it's going to build up as we do more layers. So I go in with 2 thin layers, then like a regular coat, and then a thick coat, waiting about 10 minutes between each coat. Now you can see as those layers are building, that blue is starting to come through. Okay, so now that the paint is fully dried, the next step is going to be peeling up that masking fluid that we put down earlier. So yeah, it just comes off real easy, just sort of work it off. If it's a little hard to get off, you can also use like a high grit sandpaper or a cloth that might help get it off a little easier. Now as I peel off the masking fluid, you can see that chrome come through. Okay, so now that all the pieces are painted, it's time to move on to assembling everything. So it's just going to be a lot of gluing the pieces together. So here I'm working on the jaw piece, just gluing together these kind of like, I don't know what you call them, speaker things. And then gluing them together, and then I'll be gluing them to the jaw piece. And these little pieces on the top of the jaw here are just for aligning it, so that when I connect it to the main headpiece, I can glue it in the right spot. Now I'm adding the detail pieces to the main headpiece here, these little antenna, the ear pieces, the eyes, and this little detail on the back. Okay, so now I've got the two main pieces fully assembled, but I need to connect them together. And I want it to be where I can access the inside so I can add electronics later on. So to do that, this plate connects the two of them, and I'm going to add magnets on the inside of the main head and onto the top of this plate so that I can remove it, but that it will stay together when I need it to. So I'm just going in and adding a little dab of super glue where I'm going to put the magnets, then setting the magnet there. Now, after that glue has fully dried, I go in and I add the corresponding magnet that's going to go on that connecting plate, and I mark the top of it with a Sharpie so that I know which side needs to be glued down. Okay, so while that glue dries, we're going to move on to the fun part, which is weathering. Now, SM-33 is old and beaten up, so he needs to look, appropriately grimy. So to achieve that, what I'm going to do is an acrylic wash over everything. This is just some cheap black acrylic paint, watered down, that I'm just going to spread over the whole model, let it dry just a little bit, and then wipe it off before it completely sets. And you can see as I wipe it off, it leaves just a little bit of paint to give that sort of grimy, dirty look. And then I'm just going to go over this in a couple of layers to kind of build up that texture, and I'm trying to get into all those sort of, nooks and crannies where dirt and things would get in there. And after going over it a couple times, this is what it looks like. It's amazing how just a little bit of acrylic paint can add just a lot of detail and texture to a piece. Now I'm doing the same thing with the main headpiece, just taking that black acrylic wash and going over the whole thing. I grabbed a bigger brush for this just because there's more surface area. And I'm especially making sure to get those areas of texture on the model because that's where the dirt and grime would accumulate more, and it just holds that paint a little better. And like I did on the other piece, just going over it in a couple of layers that helps build up that texture, because the first layer is going to be a little thin and you're not going to get as much paint down. But if you keep building up those layers, they're going to build on top of each other to create a more realistic effect. You can also vary how long you let that wash, sit on there and dry. I like to not let it sit very long and just keep doing more layers, because the longer you let it sit, the more it's going to stick to the paint. Okay, so now that everything is fully weathered, we gotta get everything fully assembled. So, gotta add the jaw piece to this connector plate so that it can snap into the main headpiece. And then the final piece I need to glue on is the neck. Okay, so 33 is fully assembled now, and with the magnets in place, we can now remove these two main pieces so that we can add electronics on the inside here. Okay, so we've got the light working in SM-33 for now. Now, I want to add more electronics eventually, but for now, it's just the light, and it's just this simple little LED in there. Now eventually I want to add it to where he can say some voice lines and the LED can turn on and off, but that's going to be a later video. So for now, we just got the light. Okay, so here's our finished SM-33 build. This was a lot of fun to work on. I had a really good time. I'm very happy with how it turned out. This is my first droid that I've ever made, and it was a lot of fun. I think I'd like to make more in the future. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. Overall, just really pleased with this. It was a lot of fun. I love 33. It was probably one of my favorite characters in Skeleton Crew. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments. So yeah, but let's take one final look at 33. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and may the Force be with you.